So we got that planetary home. Make sure those gears are lined up there, the ring gear and the planetary gears, everything's lined up and where it should be. And now our shaft back in here. And now that we've got the shaft in, next we're going to be working on the gears and the chain. Let's put in the gears and the chain there. This chain looks to be in good shape. I did check it. It's got lots of room from the end of the case here. And what happens is you got to have a tight side and you're going to have a slack side. It's good. It slides down pretty good. You get this started, slides down pretty good there, and then actually once you've got the chain and sprockets on, then you can actually fit that fork in through here and fit it into place, line it up, make sure your peg lines up into the slot there, and then all you got to do is just slide in your metal rod. So we've assembled the gears, the chain, we've got our shaft back in here, we put our shift fork in, we've got our rod in, we've got the shift fork engaged into the mechanism that actuates the lever there. Center is neutral, and then one side is going to be basically high, and the other side is going to be low. Those are the three options you have in this one here. So next thing is we got to get it ready to put our top half of the case on. So we want to clean our surface really well. I just used some brake cleaner, wipe that down real good. Throw on some silicone, nice light coat on there so that when you put it on, it's not squishing a huge bead on the inside, and then that ends up falling off and plugging up your filter for your pump here, because there was a lot of silicone that was basically jammed in there when we took this apart. So you don't need too much silicone, just enough to make the seal. So what I'm going to do is I've smeared that on there, and then I'm just going to let it sit on top for a while, and then I'll tighten down the bolts. You want to make sure that you have this gear in properly. As you can see, it kind of goes down, so the other side of this gear is flat all the way across, and this has kind of got this recess or this pocket or whatever you want to call it in the gear. Now that pocket is for this viscous coupler here. So this is the top, and then if you turn it over, you'll see that same style taper. You want to make sure that your snap ring that goes in here, so if you have it on the wrong way, obviously this is going to be up too high, and then your snap ring's not going to line up. So there's a check that you can do there too. And here it is. Here we just threw that viscous coupler on here, and there's our first snap ring groove, so it is correct. We want to make sure that everything's proper before we go gluing up this top half of the case here. Don't want to forget your pickup tube and your filter for your pump. Everything else in here is there's nothing else that goes in there. Lastly, you want to make sure you got your magnet in the slot here. That's in place, and everything should be ready to go. Get our viscous coupler back put on here. 2 lock rings that go in place. One lock ring basically secures the viscous coupler. The other lock ring is what the top of this, I believe, sits on. It kind of holds it in between that ring and this bearing here. Bearing will just slide on. Then we've got our snap ring that we put on there to hold that into place. This bearing was good. It's quiet, it's nice, there's no hang-ups, no catching, no noise. Gonna reuse that. And then we've got this gear for the speed sensor that goes on there. And now I do believe we have everything ready for the housing to go on. We've got our hose connected on here for the pump. We've got our 2 rings in here. We've got our pump, our bearing, our snap ring, this. Now we're ready to put that housing on. So we put on this the tailstock here. We just put some silicone on there, put it on, bolted it up after we had installed our new seal. And then once that's on there, then there's a snap ring in here that you gotta spread open. Once you get it located in the proper spot, then it fits in that groove, and you'll release it, and then that holds that bearing in place where it's supposed to be. Ordinarily, there was a plate on here with a couple of T25 head screws or bolts that held that down, but the rebuild kit here had this rubber plug, so I'm going to be putting the rubber plug in there instead. We've got our basically our selector arm here, and then all that is just I think it's a 9/16 nut, and then I threw a washer on there. We have our indicator here that just threads into place. There's an O-ring on there. There's an O-ring in here. We've got our seal on there. We've got our seal in the back. We've got that rubber plug that's going to go in there and seal that. Silicone sealant here, silicone sealant here. And now we're going to be putting on our input bearing cover. This is where the transmission bolts up. So I just got some silicone sitting and setting on there. And I also replaced the seal in here. Another thing to note is here's the seal that came out. That's basically a single lip style seal. You can see how narrow that is. I replaced that with a double lip seal, if you can see that. So it's just going to seal better. And again, I put some silicone around the exterior of the seal, let that set up for a little bit, press it into place. That's going to help seal it. So all new seals. And then once we put this on, that'll be good. This is basically like a detent with a spring, and that basically there's a pin in there, and it puts pressure on the selector arm, gear, whatever you want to call it, and that's basically so this doesn't like come out of gear, right? So that's got a bunch of tension on there, holding it in whatever you've selected, holding it in place. There's another O-ring on that. I put this in last because it's plastic and I don't want it to break while I'm manipulating this thing on the bench. Another O-ring in here. Clean that up. If it's in good shape, reuse it. If not, put a new O-ring in there. Lastly is our yoke, which is going to go on the front output here. Usually when you install that, you're going to want to clean or your seal surface. Just put some Vaseline on the seal there when you're installing it, so you don't damage the seal. And then also too, there's this rubber seal that goes on there. That'll go on, and then when you torque down the yoke and get it torqued down, it puts the squeeze in here, seals it both on the face and then on the circumference, basically right here. So that's just going to seal in this space here against the nut and then in the splines there, so you don't get any leaks. This little bracket here, that's just going to hold on our speedo sensor. And that's pretty much it. And then once you've selected it, so the center one is neutral, and then if you go all the way in, that you can tell by how fast it's spinning. So that looks like that's low because it's going pretty slow. Maybe not as fast as the input here. And then you go past, so it's low, neutral, and then all the way back the other way is high. And then, as you can see, it's spinning at the same speed, so that's high. And those are your two select on here. So in is low, out is high. And if this arm is not in the right orientation, just take off the nut, flip it around, and but you'll see when you put it together, you'll see which way that arm needs to be when you install it into the vehicle. Last thing to note here is when you're putting this cover on, that little notch in there has to line up with this hole, because that's going to be your oil feed in to lubricate the bearing in here. So you want to make sure you got that lined up proper. Those are going to be 4 10 mil bolts to bolt that on.